Welcome back to the Beyond the Bestseller podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Schuknecht, and today's guest is Adriana Vaccaro, author of Culture Minded: 6 Tools to Transform Organizational Culture and Empower Humanity. Adriana, welcome. And actually, I want to ask you first, did I say your name right? I should have asked you that before we started recording.
No, you said it perfectly.
Okay. I had that panic of like, oh no, I didn't ask you.
No,
Some
that's
names look
great.
straightforward, but people pronounce things differently. So I just wanted to make sure.
That was good. Thanks. Thank you for saying it correctly, and most importantly, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on. And I'm excited to talk about this book, having worked in leadership in companies for 20 years. 20 plus years. Culture is really, really important. And so I'm interested to kind of hear more about your book and what you do, because you also have a company. It was Culture Redesigned is the name of your company, right? Okay.
Yes.
So tell me about Culture Minded and how this book came about.
Well, it's interesting because culture minded is a framework. It's an evidence-based framework, is statistically validated. And when I started the writing process, I realized, because I had a writing coach and all the wonderful people you need around you to do it correctly, that statistics don't really make a book appealing. So they kept pushing me to bring my personal story. Like, we need to tell stories. And I think when I started the writing process, that's not something I was trying to do, like tell my own journey or how I experience culture in different places. I'm an immigrant. What I Places where I notice the prototypes for success that maybe will look different than me. But then, as they were guiding me through this process, I realized, and I had these moments of clarity that made me realize that I created the whole model based on a lot of experiences that maybe I had seen or I had maybe mediated for others. So it was all story based, I guess. I just didn't know it. And that was really special for me as a first time writer.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I feel like I had the opposite with in writing my book. I wrote the draft and then I was like, is this just like too many stories about me, and like, am I teaching anyone anything? So it's
Oh,
funny that
yes.
you but those stories are so important because people do connect with they connect with you through the stories, and they remember things through stories. Stories are so powerful. I love that you share that was your experience in writing the book, that you kind of were forced to pull some of that in.
Yes. And actually, as you revisit stories when years have passed and now you have more experience and you're older and have whatever more education, I think you're able to analyze it as if you weren't the main character, and that was also a great exercise for me to see my own evolution. So it was pretty magical.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so tell me, like, this book is, you must work with company leadership, I would imagine, helping with redesigning culture. Actually, I'm going to ask you for a story. So tell me a story about somebody that you worked with, and like kind of why they came to you. I know you have to be careful about what you can probably say about, but a story that you're able to share of, why they came to you and how you were able to help them redesign their culture.
I do have a couple of clients that I think we become, so close in that relationship. But one particular client is a phenomenal human services organization, and they're pretty large, and they had, values and job descriptions and all the things you need to have. Um, but the conversation started with, how do we make it real inside and outside of the organization? So people were outside of the organization providing great services for different people, but they were missing kind of like the internal in-group bias, maybe like feeling part of something bigger. And I love that project because usually clients will give me a, like, you're going to work with senior leadership and then they're going to trickle it down. But this particular organization wanted us to work with every level of the organization. And that was so exciting. We actually recreated new values that came from them. Like, we just facilitated the meeting. And then we took every value and we were talking about how many versions of this value can we have, how many behaviors, how many things we can see someone doing that really demonstrate that value. And then we took all that information, we created a culture blueprint, and that goes over everything they do, their performance review, their marketing, branding, how they facilitate events, how they hire, how they interview. And they have been really serious also about sustainability. I really is really painful for me to see, like, I work with a company for a year, and then if they change their HR person, the new HR person comes and kind of like starts over, and it's like, no. You have
Yeah.
to cultivate culture, right? You have to
Yeah.
continue what was there. So they have been pretty amazing at the continuity of the work. So I'm really proud of them. That has been, I mean, I've worked with multiple organizations, like some really large, but this one I'm talking about, it has been probably the most interaction I've had at all levels. I will have part-time employees, per diem employees, like we had sessions with everyone. And I feel like it really demonstrated their commitment to culture.
Hmm. So, a couple questions for you. One, so for somebody who maybe doesn't know much about company culture, how do you explain what that is?
I like to say culture is what happens, it becomes what happens automatically. So it is like your autopilot. Think of culture as your autopilot. When you don't have the manager right there, when you don't have the handbook in front of you, culture is how a customer will experience someone in your organization. So it's that collective autopilot that everyone uses. And it is determined not necessarily by the core values or by, the posters on the wall, but the behaviors that are consistently rewarded or corrected. That's really what defines your culture.
Yeah.
And I also want to say, for people that maybe think that they don't have to work on culture, there is a culture in your company, whether you
Yeah.
work on it or not. So you might as well be intentional about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was, you kind of led me to my next question, which was going to be, at what point do you start working on culture? So for me, I started my business, about a year and a half ago, and the focus is like on the client service, these things that, like, as the owner now, it's like these things are really important. We have to worry about these things, and culture feels very fuzzy and unnecessary at this stage, even though I know it's important, right? Like, I know it's important, but also you're like, that is the last thing I'm worried about. Like, I would need to make sure that we're, bringing in new clients, that we're, focused on our service delivery in these things. So for me, I know it's important, but also, like, what would you tell somebody? Like, what is the point where you need to start putting those things into place? So for small businesses, at what point do you need to start thinking about that?
I love that you said service delivery. I think culture is not an initiative. All initiatives are possible because of culture. Like, even if it's a company with one person, let's think about service delivery. If you're really concentrating in serving your client, you have to think of the system you are creating, right? Because serving one client, maybe you can do that, but once you have 10 clients, how do you deliver the same level of quality? So you can start thinking about, what can you measure? Like, maybe you can measure how satisfied your client is at the 30-day point. I'm obviously making this up. That starts bringing up things that are important in your culture. So even if it's just you want to know after 30 days they're still happy, they're still feeling like they made the right decision. So that is culture work. Even though you're not calling it culture work, we're calling it service delivery or client satisfaction. That is culture work right there because you're making something important. For you, service delivery is going to be important. So as you grow and bring more people, even if you never mention the word culture, they're gonna know you care about service delivery because you are tracking how they feel on day 30th.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, oh, I was going to ask another question related to that. So part of it for me is like, so I have, I have certain team members. Oh, I know what I was going to ask. So the values piece, right? So one of the things I started right away, I had a few people on the team, but like more like contractors. I think I had one other employee at the time, and we sat down and we mapped out like what our core values are. Having worked in larger companies, like I know that's something that we need to have, and also like I wanted to be intentional from the beginning about these are the things that are important to me, right? Like this is the culture that I want to create, and so these are the words I want to put out there, and the things that I want them to the new people on the team to feel about what we're about, right? But you mentioned like the values, that the values came from the employees. I was small enough where it's like, I mean, there's like three of us, like, at that time. Now we have more. And as we grow, I'm kind of tied to the values that I put together, right? Like, so at what point does it become like now it's the team that decides rather than the leader who is deciding what those values are?
Well, as individuals, we have core values, and our alignment with an organization or a set of shared values is what allows us to feel good at work. So I'm not saying that everybody has to go and ask their employees what their values should be. It's okay if we don't have the same values, but I have to find a way to align my set with your organizational set because that's how we stay in brain positive activity, right? If one of your values is, I don't know, kindness, and I'm rude to one of your employees, you have to have a conversation with me about, you know, rude doesn't match my set. Like, how did that happen? So that I can find a way to align my behavior with your set of shared values. So I think that is important. And then in terms of, I think we all get attached to our set. I relate to that. Like I like the values I have, and I wrote them when it was just me, and now we're a bigger team. And I always like to talk about them and maybe invite them to how do you think we can enrich this value, or are there any other ways that you can think of how we can show people respect or whatever the value is. So I think as long as you let them translate it in a way that works for them, you don't necessarily have to rewrite them. You just have to let people own them in some way or another.
Yeah. Yeah. What about I can think of companies that I've worked in where uh there was core values. Well, actually, one of them didn't have any core values. That was probably, part of the
One.
issues anyway. But but like I left that company and I went to work at other places that had core values, and I'm like, oh, like I understand how valuable that is. But the first company was like the culture was created solely around make more money, like make more money in this company, like bring in, it was not a good culture. But um but I've also worked in companies where there were core values and they were things that we said, but not necessarily things that you would experience so how does a company, like, clearly anyone coming to you for help has to be aware and know that they have a culture problem, right? Like,
Not always.
okay.
I love what you said. I absolutely love what you said because a lot of times maybe a manager finds out about my work and they're like, oh, we need you. And then when they get me a meeting with HR or with the CEO, is like, oh, our culture is great. we don't need you. I'm like, oh, okay. So I always like to bring the analogy of, why don't we take a measurement? Because you think the culture is great. So does everyone agree with you? Because when we don't want to know, it's like if we don't get on the scale and we think we're not going to gain weight because we're not stepping on it. So numbers tell a really good story. So why don't we see, if, I mean, if you have a great culture, and I take a measurement today on how your employees feel, you're just going to have proof that you're right. But if we're just going to believe what you want to believe, we might have your belief here and reality somewhere else. So I like to have that conversation as a friendly way to say, well, let me prove that, let me make it real for you. If
Yeah.
that is a reality, I can give you the data, and then you will know you do not have a culture problem.
Yeah.
And usually, even one 2 question survey gives a pretty accurate measurement of how employees are feeling.
Yeah.
Um, and every company has an area of improvement, but a lot of time there is that notion that, oh, everything is great. So yeah, get on the
Yeah.
scale. Get on the scale.
Yeah, I like that. I like that analogy a lot because it's true. Yeah, it's like, uh, and it often is. It's HR or leadership who thinks like, yeah, everything's great, everything's fine, and it's like that's not the consensus of the people that are doing the work every day. Like they're on the ground meeting with your clients, whatever, and they're not happy, or they just don't feel good about the environment for whatever reason. Um, and the question I was going to ask is like, so we have these values, right, and we say these are our values, but like that's not what's being experienced necessarily, right? Like so what you said would help leadership or HR like align those
Both.
things. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And
Yeah.
it's very common. Some values, there is, I'm just thinking of a couple of clients that use the family vibe idea in a very well intended way. And it sometimes, most of the time, it works while they're a particular size. But as they start getting bigger and you have employees in different parts of the country or the world, I mean, are they really like a family? Like, seriously, realistically, do you even know their names? Or why are we saying we are like your family, but you've never met them? So I
Yeah.
try to be kind and practice candor when I bring those realities, because I understand how it made sense at one point.
Yeah.
But we have to evolve those concepts.
Sure.
What do we call it now? Well, like, how can we um, get it to a level of maturity that a person, if your company is in Texas and I have a person in Brazil you've never met, how can we modify the value so the person in Brazil doesn't think is ridiculous?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, totally. You when you talked about the like surveying the employees, I had this memory of um there was a time when HR did a survey when I was working in a corporate environment, and I was on the leadership team, and I did have that I was having this conflict inside my brain and my body, like about the fact that we were saying certain things, but that was not what was being experienced, and it was like, so leadership's like, yeah, everything's great, and this is how it is, blah, 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 and I was feeling like, but we need support, or we need these things, and so HR had done this survey, and I had answered honestly, and in a meeting with HR and leadership in this company, they bring up the survey results and they open up the answer to one of the questions, showing these are the people who are struggling. And my name was on the list of people because I had answered a question a certain way. And I was horrified. I had no idea that these anonymous surveys were absolutely not anonymous, and that I'd be in a meeting with my peers and my name on the screen is like this and then I had no opportunity to say like, no, like I'm not struggling. Like, I mean, yes, I guess you could say I was struggling, but like my struggle was coming from, we're saying one thing but we're experiencing something else, like these things are frustrating. So anyway, all of that to share that story, like I am curious about, like, I now have my own company, so like I don't have to worry about taking somebody else's anonymous survey, but like for people that are in companies, like are these surveys anonymous because we're told they are? And that was not my experience.
I had a similar experience. I'm so well. First of all, I am so sorry
I
about your
saw your face when I said it. You were like
I am
your
so
mouth
sorry about
dropped.
your experience. I had a similar experience, but I was in HR and I had hired a company to do a survey, like, like I got the membership. And then when we got results, there were these four responses. My boss wanted to know who they came from. And I'm like, we can't, it's anonymous. So he sends an email to the company and they send him the IP addresses. um, all of that to say, there are very ethical organizations like Qualtrics, like Predictive Index. Um, those surveys, there is no, you can email the CEO. You will not be able to know who said what. And I love, now that's a question every time if I go to a new client, and obviously sometimes I have to um, adopt whatever they're using because they don't want to get a new system. So before I send anything out, I will make sure this is really anonymous. I remember experiencing that myself, and it was like, how why? I'm so sorry you went through that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was eye-opening because from that point on, I refused to take any of the surveys because I was like, you
Yeah.
can't tell me these are anonymous and then show my answers to my boss, my peers, but everyone else. Like, no, I won't take your surveys anymore. Because yeah, like that was very concerning to me, and that is not ethical. If especially if you're telling people that these are anonymous, and then clearly it was not. Um, but again, it was, going back to like them saying like, oh, these people are struggling. Like my struggle was coming from like what we're saying is not what we're doing, or what we're saying is not what's being experienced. And it was frustrating. And I felt like I was like voicing that concern and not being heard. And ultimately I'm not there anymore, and that's fine, but yeah, I think those surveys can be great. I do want to say, like, I think those surveys are great and helpful, but I do now have concerns about anything like that. If they're supposed to be ethical or supposed to be anonymous.
Yes.
But anyway, what about? So it sounds like people come to you. Maybe they don't know they have a problem, but they're coming to you for help. But one of the companies that I worked in that I mentioned that didn't have any values, like that team didn't see, like the leaders of that company didn't see at all that there was even a need for culture development. Like they didn't. It was like they didn't even see that like anything touchy feely or like anything that wasn't just like do the work and get the job done and make more money for the company. Like there was nothing outside of that for them. I don't think there's anything you could do to change that, right? But like how can you, like, if you were given the opportunity to talk to owners of a company like that or leaders in a company like that, like how would you help them see that the culture, working on culture, actually can help their bottom line if they if they create a good culture? Like how do you help them see the relation between the two?
Well, I my favorite way of doing this, like, is explaining the concept of in-group bias. Like we all, our brain, all of us are wired to be part of something. So that's why, like, if you go to a place and you have five people at your table and three of them are having coffee and you're having coffee, like those are your people, right? You find something in common, that's your people. When you have values, you're giving people a way to activate that in-group bias by living those values, because the other part of our brain that is also wired there, we're not meant to be inclusive, we're meant to do the opposite of inclusion. Like we're all the time kind of like scanning, like me, not like me, like me, not like me, right? So if we offer values, people can find ways to connect that go beyond the obvious, right? Beyond the all the accountants together or all the women together, where it's all the people that understand respect. That's the shirt we're gonna wear. So it gives us a way to allow people to contribute, allow people to experience a sense of belonging regardless of who they are, because we're giving them a path to sort of belong.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I like that. I wish I could connect you with those folks. It was like that was a hill I was or a battle I was not going to win, right? Like it was just
The
like,
battles, right?
yeah, yeah. Well, in my battle, what the way I picked my battle was, I was like, I can't work here anymore. Yeah. Which I think ultimately for anyone in a company where like you're not aligned, you said earlier, I can't remember how you said it, but like being aligned, like your own values with the values of the company where you're working, or being, how did you say that?
I think it was probably values alignment. Like you find
Yeah.
a way to connect, but you have to translate it in a way that works for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're not feeling it, I think I've learned from, my career, just like the different places I've been, that if you're not aligned, you're gonna feel that. Like you're gonna feel that misalignment. And if it is something you can change, like fight for it. But if it's not, like pick your battles and maybe look for the next opportunity, right? Like yeah. Well, Adriana, I want to ask you, just the title of my podcast is Beyond the Bestseller, which comes from the idea I had that people write books for more than just book sales and more than becoming a bestseller. Obviously, those two things are great, but it's not really the purpose in writing the book, right? So, what was your purpose in writing your book that was beyond the bestseller?
I think for me was visibility. A lot of people are doing culture works just like in any other industry, and I wanted to tell the fact that my framework is evidence based and we can measure the progress. It's not just, ethereal, I guess. I like that it's concrete. So that was my objective. However, I achieved that, but I've also achieved many other things. And it's what made me kind of really like the name of your podcast, because I wasn't thinking about it, but we had turned the book into a 1 day event. We have turned the book into a certification program. We have turned the book into this leadership cohort based thing that we can do with HR people. So we had really um, diversify our ways of generate income, and beyond income, our ways of connecting to people that weren't in our ecosystem. So we have a book portal that has a free leadership assessment, so people take that and they realize what type of leader they are. There's a lot of free materials that they can access there, visuals, even scripts on how to have a conversation when someone is out of alignment. So it has given us the opportunity to kind of like increase our reach, and also we've been able to create new products that didn't exist before the book, and I didn't imagine they will exist, honestly. And then that has been quite rewarding. That has been a great experience.
I love that. Well, this episode won't come out till probably late spring, I think, which you and I could talk about offline. But one of the things that I'm planning a writing retreat in October, and one of the things that we're working on, I'm collaborating with Laura DeFranco around doing a workshop on the business of your book. So I love what you just said, because it's like taking the book and turning it into other ways that it contributes to your business, and other ways that it, like all the things that you mentioned. That's really cool and exciting that you're doing all of those things. And so many people, have a book and don't think about all these other opportunities that they might be able to generate, income or revenue, or better serve their potential clients, create lead magnets, like all these things that we can do. So yeah, just I'm mentioning that here on the podcast so people can check that out. We should have more information about that out by the time this comes out. So, well, Adriana, we will link to your book in the show notes. How else can listeners, viewers, get in touch with you or learn more about what you're doing?
Thank you. I exist only on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I've dedicated way more time that I want to admit. I tried to do the other ones, just we didn't jive. So LinkedIn, Adriana Vaccaro. And I also, my website is cultureredesign.com, or the book portal is culture.minded. You don't need anything to enter the book portal. You can just go in and you can see a lot of resources, join our newsletter, download different things. So again, just a lot of information.
Is the leadership assessment available on the culture.minded site?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay, because that seems like a really useful tool for people. So definitely, if you're interested in your leadership, exploring your leadership path, and maybe looking for ways to improve that, that seems like a really great tool to use. Well, thank you, Adriana, for coming on and sharing your book, and thank you for writing Culture Minded. It seems like a really really useful book, and it seems very necessary in a lot of companies, especially the ones I've worked in. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Kelly, for having me.
Looking for a community of women writers to support and inspire you on your journey? Join the Author Power Circle. Connect weekly with fellow authors, stay accountable, and move your book forward in an encouraging community. Learn more at kellyschuknecht.com